My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beef Pork Ribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds are geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic, multiverse. It's mega Christmas, strangest franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
And we do it furiously. I was trying to think of like a better Mad Max joke to put in there, but
because some people might think we're talking about Fast and the Furious today.
Oh yeah, that's true. That is a franchise that also exists and has the word furious in it.
Yes. Doesn't that just make you furious?
No. It doesn't.
Fair enough.
Doesn't make me fast either.
So I have seen some movies since we last recorded an episode that I just want to give my little quick reviews for. I saw Creed 3 in theaters with a friend, and Michael B. Jordan, as we've talked about on the podcast before, Michael B. Jordan is a big anime fan. He's such a big anime fan that when they do a flashback to Adonis Creed as like a teenager, you see his like bedroom and you see like a Naruto poster and you see like some Gundam like toys on his like dresser. So he's such a big anime fan. He has to make his characters anime fans as well.
Naruto's a weird one. Was there no Hajime no Ippo merchandise or anything like that? Because that to me seems like the perfect opportunity. It's literally a 20 plus year running manga about boxing.
No, but really it's funny you mention that though, because as people may know, with Creed 3, it's Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut. So it's like the first movie he's ever directed. And there were moments in the movie where the action felt very stylish and there was like slow-mo on like the impact of like punches hitting the body and some like unique camera angles. And I couldn't put my finger to it when I was watching it. Neither could my friend. But after the fact, I like looked up and said that Michael B. Jordan was inspired by anime for his direction style. I was like, that makes sense. And he like references Hajime no Ippo and I think it's Megalobox and
okay, yeah.
He mentions a couple different anime that basically inspired his direction of the movie.
Ippo is like renowned for the use of sound effect and kind of like slow motion and motion blur during the fight scenes, because it's a weird one to, right? Because it's a manga about boxing, but like because you get a lot of inner dialogue during the fights, right? Like the fights can be several chapters long, but then when you try to animate that, you can't make action unless you were to pause it all the time to hear inner monologue, which, as the Dune movie has showed us, not the new one, the David Fincher one, like, it can be very weird when you cut up the action all the time just to hear inner monologue. Like, when you're reading it, it's fine, but animating it is kind of weird. So, like, the Hajime no Ippo anime, especially New Challenger, has had to like get kind of original with its use of like slow motion, of motion blur, of like stylized versions of fighting so that it didn't kind of get boring during the fights.
Yeah, I've also been watching some YouTube videos about the animation of Dragon Ball, and they talk about how in the manga, part of what makes Toriyama's art so impressive is that it has anticipation, where a panel is drawn kind of like showing like the person pulling their hand back before they throw a punch. And apparently that does a lot to make the impact more felt when you can see how it got there.
Yeah, well, there's a similar thing in choreography that like Jackie Chan does in his movies, where you see the wind up, you see the like whenever there's a close up for the impact, they actually rewind 1 or 2 frames so that the impact isn't a direct following of what happened. Which is like something Jackie Chan is famous for doing, and a lot of like Hong Kong kung fu movies do this. Whereas like most things that get done in the United States and Hollywood, they'll match the cut perfectly for the impact, or even take a few frames so you don't directly see the impact. As opposed to in martial arts movie, usually they'll like the punch is about to hit the face, and then you'll cut, and then the fist isn't impacting the face; it's actually still a few inches, and then impacts the face, so that you see the action. But yeah, that type of paneling is something that Akira Toriyama and Ichiro Oda are pretty famous for, is like having not just original, like unusual paneling, like the panels are not always just squares following one another, but also having action uh, flow from one panel to the next, and sometimes even literally having like, especially in One Piece, like especially with Luffy stretching, where sometimes his fist will cross the panel into the next one, and things like that that really emphasize the action.
So having said all that, you could see the influence of anime on Creed 3. I just wasn't able to put a finger to it while I was watching it. It's a really great movie. I want to give it at least 3.4 out of 4 bat cookies. The only thing that I guess I could say negative about is that Rocky isn't in the movie at all, and that has nothing to do with the movie itself. That's totally behind the scenes stuff between Sylvester Stallone and the producers of the Rocky movies. So I can't like fault Michael B. Jordan as a director for not having Rocky in the movie.
Well, and I think a lot of people wanted, like, I feel like some people wanted that, right? They kind of wanted to see what a Rocky movie without Rocky could be.
Yeah, like this really feels like Creed is becoming its own franchise essentially, because none of like the Rocky film characters are left. It's all just people introduced in the Creed movies. It just, his presence was like, he, even if he had a cameo, it would have done a world of wonders, because the first 2 Creed movies build up their relationship, their father-son relationship, so much that when Adonis Creed gets to a really like low place in this movie, it is kind of weird that Rocky doesn't even like call him to say, "Hey, how's it going? It looks like it got pretty rough."
Like, you think he could have literally phoned in and it still would have been better than what we
Even
got?
if it was just his voice,
Yeah.
honestly,
So
like,
that's what I
he's
mean.
like,
Like,
"You
literally
got
just
this,
phoned
kid.
it.
Like, you don't need me anymore."
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. So Creed 3 is great. Everyone should go see in theaters, unless you don't like boxing movies, in which case, or you don't like the Rocky movies, in which case it's probably not for you anyway.
But you should still check out Hajime no Ippo, even if you don't like boxing, because it's that good.
Sure.
Beef pork ribs.
And speaking of Rocky, I have never seen any of the original Rocky movies. I'm really showing. I'm revealing myself here.
Oh man, do not tell Mjolnir.
They are famous, of course. Like, they're some of the most famous sports movies ever. So I know all about them. I've seen people talk about them, but I've never actually sat down and watched them all. But now that MGM is owned by Amazon, all of the Rocky Creed movies are on Amazon Prime Video. So a few weeks ago, after having seen Creed 3, I'm like, yeah, I should really go back and watch these. So I watched the very first Rocky movie from 1976. And it's a good movie, but it's definitely like, it's definitely a movie from the 70s.
Yeah.
Like, the musical score only comes on in like random parts of the movie. There's some characters that are really like awkward. Mickey as the trainer has a much smaller role in the movie than I imagined. Like, I guess I was expecting like a Mr. Miyagi level mentor,
right?
But he really doesn't do anything too extraordinary as a trainer.
I don't think he does in the entire series, really. Like, he's just there because he was because he was the most famous actor in the first movie, right? Like, everybody else, including especially Sylvester Stallone, were nobodies. Like,
yeah,
it was kind of a weird movie to get made.
Yeah. And of course, it's funny for me that Burgess Meredith plays Mickey, because naturally Burgess Meredith was the Penguin in the 1960s Batman show, which I've seen a lot of. So naturally, anytime I see, and he's even got that kind of voice, that you can't help but draw the connection to the Penguin. But Rocky's great. I'm looking forward to watching the other ones now, but I would probably only give it like, in the lens of 2023, it's, to me, it's only like a 2.7 out of 4 bad cookies.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I honestly, it's a strange one, and I think it's a lot more about what it became than what that movie is.
Yeah. And also knowing that Sylvester Stallone wrote the movie himself, and that prior to him writing Rocky, it was like there had never been an actor that had written a script. Like you see it all the time now, right?
Yeah,
Actors
but
doubling
I mean,
as,
he also invested a lot of his time and money in it. Like it was very much a make or break thing for him,
oh
and
yeah,
like there
totally,
would be no other Sylvester Stallone movie if it hadn't worked.
totally. And then finally, Tater Tot and I went and saw Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania last night. It was my third time seeing it, her first. And you know what? I know when we talked about it in our last episode, I was kind of, my attitude was, this is not the Ant-Man 3 I would have made. And I think that was kind of like coloring my impression of it. Because for her, she said it's like the outside of No Way Home, which is kind of the exception to the rule. It's like her favorite movie that she's seen in Phase 4. Or this is now technically Phase 5. She went as far as to give it 3.2 out of 4 back cookies. So,
Oh wow, yeah.
which is
Then
definitely more
again,
than me.
though, and I think we mentioned this last time. What do you have to compare it with?
There's some, there's like, I liked Shang-Chi, and
Oh, I guess Shang-Chi is in there. That was not terrible, mostly.
some people liked Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, that's true. I actually did like a lot of aspects of that one.
Are there any movies or shows you've seen that you want to recommend to the people?
Uh, I started watching Miraculous.
Like that show about the girl who dresses like a ladybug?
Yeah, because because it's a French show, and I have a daughter, and I don't want to just show her English shows when she's a kid, and that one is made in France, heavily influenced by, the Japanese companies that dip their feet into it, because yeah, it's produced by Toei as well.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, so there are a lot of anime tropes in it, weirdly enough. And eh, I mean, as far as kids show go, it's okay, I guess. Trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, I watched Marcel the Shell with Shoes, which was one of the nominated for best animated pictures, and it was really good. Like, not just for a kids movie or for like it was just straight up a great movie. Very emotional, very heartfelt, a little bit predictable, but not in a way that took you out of it. Um, yeah, no, it was very cute, very enjoyable. I liked it, and I would give it probably a solid 3.6 out of 4 bat cookies. Like it was, I really enjoyed it.
I'm going to send you a link here. I just discovered this last night, but there's a live action Knights of the Zodiac movie that's coming out next month.
What? In
Yeah, so
Japan or
no, in America. So like take a look, like I just sent you a link to we'll take a pause and you can watch the trailer and we'll talk about it.
it's
All right, you've just watched the trailer, but there's something else you wanted to mention.
yes, Solo Leveling just got an anime, and if you don't know what Solo Leveling is, it's a manhwa, which is a Korean manga, and it's really good, and hopefully the anime will be just as good. So check it out when it comes out.
Now, I just stumbled across this trailer. I was dumbfounded. I'm like, usually I hear about anime shows
Yeah,
getting
especially Saint
American.
Seiya. Like,
Yeah, it's pretty famous. And then the fact that like when the trailer comes up, it shows you Sony Pictures, and then it's just Toei Animation. Like it's like they're heavily involved in this clearly.
and Sean Bean is in it.
And Sean Bean is in it, and I'm like, it doesn't look bad.
Yeah, like
I'm
it's
like, where did this come from?
Well, and it's also weird because like they haven't been adapting like 80s 90s anime a lot recently. Like they seem to be focusing a lot more on like what's popular and trends to make movies, right? Like I was genuinely surprised that, because yeah, how old is sorry, it's Knights of the Zodiac is, right?
That's the English title.
Yeah, I know. I've always heard it referred to Saint Seiya. But
it started the anime started in 1986.
yeah, and the
The
manga's
manga ran
yeah.
no, it says the manga ran from 1986 to 1990.
Okay, yeah, so it is. Yeah, it's an 80s manga. That's what I thought. Like, you don't get a lot of those being adapted right now. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell from a trailer. Like, it really could go either way. But also it is one of those shows that's borderline a bit more serious, and I think the trailer tone kind of matches what that show was a little bit. So yeah, that's potentially exciting.
Now, I watched a little bit of the Knights of the Zodiac version that aired in like the early 2000s. It was like a dub of the show from the 80s, and I remember the intro was the song "I Ran," but it was a cover of "I Ran" by Bowling for Soup, and it had like a punk rock feel to it. So my only hope for this movie is they somehow like have an Easter egg where that song's like playing on the radio or something at some point.
Yeah,
because I feel like for a lot of people in the West, anyway, that's how they would that. You know how like in the Bumblebee they play, you've got the touch, you've got the power on the radio.
Yeah.
I want that, but with "I Ran" by Bowling for Soup.
Yeah, I can respect that. I never watched it. I read part of it, but I never watched the anime itself.
Now, Beeper, we're here today to talk about Shazam! ! Fury of the Gods, which is the second and possibly the last Shazam movie. So the first film came out in 2019, and I remember liking it at the time. I think we talked about it well on the podcast, but of course you weren't on the show yet. So first of all, what's your secret origin segment when it comes to like the Shazam Captain Marvel character? And then did you like the first movie?
I think the first time I heard about Shazam was in this weird video that I think it was College Humor, but it could have been somebody else who did, about like Superman clones. And like, that wasn't College Humor, it was something else. Elijah Wood was in it, playing, I think, either Bizarro or Mecha Superman or whatever it was. But anyways, one of the things they did mention was like Shazam / Captain Marvel has like almost the same powers as Superman, but it's magic, so it's technically more powerful than him because one of the Superman's quote unquote weakness is magic. I remember being really happy about Shazam because compared to the other movies that DC was doing, and let's be honest, that DC has done since, it kind of stood out as being refreshingly slightly original and not trying to be as weirdly kind of gritty. It did definitely feel like they were trying to copy Marvel, but like not failing. And yeah, I liked it. I think there were a few things in it that just, especially the third act and the main antagonists were a little wonky, but overall I remember enjoying it. But I also didn't have a particular attachment to Shazam. And I think I was in the camp with everybody else who was like, yeah, no, but Shazam should be in the DCEU because Zachary Levi is kind of killing it.
I haven't seen that video you talk about with Elijah Wood, but I know of it because Pixel Patch, when we did our episode on Shazam, highlighted that's how he was introduced to Shazam as well.
Hey! Oh, cool. I've got something in common with him. Something else in common with him. We have a few things in common.
Yeah. I remember really liking Shazam when it came out. The only comment I had is that that the tone was kind of messy.
Yeah. Also because, a little bit of a waste of Stanley Tucci.
Stanley Tucci wasn't it? You're thinking of Mark Strong.
Yeah, I always get those two mistaken. But like his character was good, but he didn't get enough to do. But also he had like the most gruesome scene that kind of came out of nowhere. I do remember that. Yeah, that
the director of this, the director of these Shazam movies, David F. Sandberg, he like did the Annabelle movies for like The Conjuring before doing Shazam. So he has a background in horror.
Okay. So that's why it was a little bit like Multiverse of Madness, where it's like the studio wanted one thing, and the director clearly had other ideas and things that he wanted to do, and so the tone was a bit messy.
Well, it's like for the most part, it's a family friendly movie, and it's this fun like wish fulfillment kid gets to become a superhero bit. But then all the monsters and stuff are so scary. It's like I wouldn't be comfortable like letting a little kid watch this.
Well, not just that, but like he straight up like just gets his dad thrown out the window.
Yeah,
Like, and you know, it's not just scary; it's very violent all of a sudden.
yeah.
But it was good though.
And then like Shazam / Captain Marvel's comics have always been like very earnest because he's like a kid who just wants to do good, and he's a good, and you know, and then so that's like this like kind of naive adult man child being a superhero, and all the characters in like the Captain Marvel / Shazam stories are like that. But then when the New 52 happened, when DC rebooted their comics in 2011, they decided to like revamp Captain Marvel / Shazam's history so that first of all he's just called Shazam now and not Captain Marvel, which is, if you think about it, it's like if he ever wants to like, hi, I'm Shazam, it's like, well, he can't do that because he turns back when he says the word Shazam. I know that, you know, obviously Marvel Comics has a character with the same name, so they can't, I guess they couldn't keep doing that anymore, but give him a different
Yeah,
name.
it is a bit weird that he does still, yeah, that he is called the thing that he has to say.
And then beyond that, they also in the reboot basically made it more edgy so that Billy Batson was actually more of a troubled kid who had gone through the foster care system as opposed to just a nice kid. So then that
Yeah,
kind of, so then Shazam, when he's on screen or on the pages of the comics, he's more like a teenager than like an earnest kid. And that
yeah,
kind of,
which
that juvenile humor when it's on screen, yeah, feels more like the MCU than something that could
but
have
I
been a little
find
more
like
adult.
it was done pretty well. Like they did tone down the edginess a little bit in the movie, which was nice. And but I think it also like I think honestly the movie did a good job of balancing that idea that he is kind of a troubled kid, like preteen, but he is still like somewhere in him he is a kid, and Shazam kind of makes that come out because he's not like, and that is something that does make sense. And like I've worked with kids, you know, from more difficult backgrounds before, and they do tend to sometimes have that like they have this demeanor because of their experiences where they are more serious, they are, you know, a bit more angry and things like that, but then they'll have moments right when they open up or when they feel comfortable or when they feel safe where, you know, really childlike behavior will come out. And I think that that was something that the movie actually did very well, was to have like that idea that, you know, yeah, Billy kind of has the edgy thing and he's been in and out of the foster care system and that's terrible, but like when he's Shazam, when they're filming the videos, when he's discovering things, there is kind of that pure joy, which again Zachary Levi portrayed really well. Like he does, Shazam does feel like, you know, a kid in an adult's body the way that he's played, and I think that was really good for the interpretation of the character. Don't know how the new one does it, you'll have to tell me, but for the original, yeah, I really appreciated that.
And I remember some people complaining that, yeah, Zachary Levi did a great job playing like kind of a big kid in his adult's body, but he didn't feel like the actor Asher Angel who plays Billy Batson, like it didn't feel like they were playing the same character in that sense. Because
Yeah,
like
and
the exuberance that Zachary Levi has for everything when he's Shazam is not reciprocated in when it's Asher Angel playing Billy. In fact, some people went as far as say like it would make so much more sense if it was Freddy, you know, the best friend character who's becoming an adult, because he behaves a lot like Zachary Levi.
yeah, but for the reasons I just mentioned, I do think it wasn't that much of an issue. Like there was a disconnect, and I think there should have been a bit more of a similarity, but I don't think it was terrible per se, because like that is a pretty realistic thing that you would have one, like that you could have a kid that usually acts a lot more disturbed or isn't quite as exuberant, but that has these moments of like, oh my gosh, I can do this, when he feels like, and that is another thing, like the first time Shazam saves somebody, it is like he has this like, oh my gosh, I've been recognized for something that I did and it was something good and people are happy about it, right? And that is very different than the rest of his experience had been.
So the first Shazam, it got good reviews and it did well. It finished number 1 at the box office its opening weekend, but it was like a moderate success compared to other DC movies. It did not do nearly as well. And then it came out the same year as Joker. It's like those were DC's offerings in 2019. It's like, here, you can watch Shazam or Joker.
Yeah. Which isn't a very fair comparison, but I mean, it's like, well, what came out for DC this past year? It was the Batman and was there something else?
Black Adam.
Yeah, I mean, even if Black Adam had been a better movie or an average movie,
And
it's
Super
still...
Pets.
Hmm?
And don't
Oh yeah,
forget
and Super Pets. I feel it might be a bit more like Super Pets and the Batman, because from all accounts, including yours, like Super Pets was good. It wasn't amazing, but then the Batman is, arguably, by a lot of people have made this argument, arguably the best Batman movie ever made, and definitely the best DC movie in a long time, probably since Joker, and I'd say since maybe even longer than that. Like, it was really good. It wasn't just better than what they are used to giving. It was just a good movie.
So Shazam was successful enough that they decided to make a sequel, and the release date changed a bunch of times with the pandemic. At one point, it was supposed to come out this summer in July 2023, and then it was pushed up to December 2022, and then it was pushed to March 2023.
And now we got it.
And now it's here. And unfortunately, the response has not been positive. Critics and the box office are not doing good. It has on Rotten Tomatoes 51%.
Oh wow.
And I intentionally waited. I've realized that my opinion gets too colored by any reviews or information I look at before I see. So I went on like a blackout. I didn't look at anything for Shazam 2 until after I saw the film. And my impression after leaving the theater was, I really enjoyed this movie. I think this movie's great. And then I go on Rotten Tomatoes and it has like 51%.
Yeah, maybe it is being compared to the Batman as far as like DC movies, because I don't know, I haven't looked at a lot of reviews. The one that I did get was basically saying, yeah, it's a perfectly serviceable superhero movie. It's nothing out, like, it's not gonna revamp the industry. It's not a game changer or anything, but it's not bad. It's not amazing, but it's not bad either. And I don't know, looking at it, it seemed like that would be like, it would be like, from the previews and from the trailer and from what I've heard, like, it's probably has some of the same issues the first one had, where the antagonist might be a little more engaging and the hero isn't, like, the relationship to the hero isn't necessarily fully there, and the third act is a bit of a mess. And maybe that's what the problem is. Maybe it's like people were expecting it, like, I guess expecting some of the problems that were in the first movie to be fixed for the second. I don't know.
I think it's just a sign that movie critics in general are just either they're losing interest in superhero movies or they're becoming much more critical of superhero movies.
Or a little bit of both. Or they're not being paid by Marvel to make good reviews. I mean,
but
no.
No, but even Ant-Man's like Ant-Man.
Yeah, that's
3,
true.
It was not that bad. Like, it was not a 45% on Rotten Tomatoes bad movie.
Yeah, but I watched a video recently where people were saying, like, there's like the different phases that a style of movie goes through. Where it goes through like early and then like mainstream and then parodies and then or deconstruction and then parody, and after that it starts dwindling, and kind of like superhero movies are kind of in the parody / dwindling era at this point because they've been so popular for so long. Like that, you kind of have to at this point make something extraordinary or something that really stands out in order for people to be excited. And you know, like I talk about Marvel fatigue and not DC fatigue, but like whether you like it or not, superheroes get lumped up together to a certain degree, right? And so there's with the oversaturation in the market, you kind of want something a lot better than the average. Otherwise, you'll just go watch one of the other ones because, like, like when Pirates of the Caribbean came out, there were no other good pirate movies that weren't like 30 to 50 years old. Like, it was a genre that had kind of gone extinct, partially because of Cutthroat Island, which hilarious but terrible movie. And I think, but for superhero movies, you can watch half of the movies of the last 10 years and get superhero movies, most of which would be better than some of the movies that have been come out. So it doesn't really matter, right? You need something really good to stand out and for the movie to kind of elicit a positive response from people at this point.
And there is a lot of variables kind of floating around this movie that it's not this movie's fault. First of all, there's the whole Black Adam thing, wherein Black Adam is supposed to be Shazam's archenemy, but The Rock went out of his way in making the Black Adam movie and promoting it to dissociate from the Shazam universe as much as possible. And at the end of the day, he's still wearing the same outfit with a lightning bolt on his chest.
Yeah.
And because that movie was received poorly, there might be people who are like, oh, is this related to Black Adam? Okay, I don't care. I'm not interested.
Well, yeah. And of course, the entire situation that the DCEU is in right now, where, this movie doesn't really matter.
The DCEU is dead, my friend. It's now called DC Studios.
Exactly. Well, but this was a DCEU.
Yeah, this is like a holdover.
Yeah.
And I think this, I was like, I don't care if this continuity is not going to continue. I still want to see, like, this is like the last hurrah for these characters. But obviously the numbers show that actually, no, like the most people are like, well, if this movie doesn't count to the ongoing narrative, like, what's the point? Because guess what? Like, its opening weekend, it only made $30 million, which might sound impressive to some people, but the first one made almost 60 million when it came out 4 years ago. And as of right now, after its second weekend, it's only grossed 46 million domestically. It had almost a 70% drop in its second weekend. This should not happen for a big superhero movie like this. Like Cocaine Bear and Jesus Revolution and that Tom Hanks movie, A Man Called Otto, have all made more money than Shazam! Fury of the Gods.
Yeah, that's
Cocaine. Most of those movies I just mentioned, they all opened up in even fewer theaters, which means there were fewer opportunities for people to see those movies, and there's more people going to see them.
Yeah, it doesn't bode well for DC.
Well, I'm sincerely hopeful that people this is their way of saying, look, we only want to see movies if they're connected to what's coming next. So like The Flash coming out in June, which is meant to reset the universe. Maybe that's where people will come back and say, okay, I'm here. I'm in for the new show. I'm in for the new, I don't know what this means for the Aquaman movie that comes out next December. I'm wondering if they're like thinking about even shelving that one at this point. It's like, if this one hasn't done well,
but I don't know. They probably don't want to make too many, like, shelve too many movies, right? Yeah, exactly. At this point,
what does more harm, releasing this Shazam movie and it does poorly,
or refusing to release movies that people may have wanted?
I'm just saying, throw it on the streaming service. It's not going to cost you anything to just put on the streaming service.
And then if it does well, then you can.
Because the thing too is, like, what James Gunn and Peter Safran have said about like DC characters going forward is like, well, if the audience responds well, then we'll find a way to include them. So the fact that people have not responded well to the Shazam movie sincerely casts doubt on if we'll see Zachary Levi as Shazam again.
Yeah, which like, and it is that unfortunate thing because like one of the things that didn't happen was him interacting with Superman, right? Which I think was something a lot of people wanted.
Yeah, so I feel bad for this movie and for everyone involved because again, the end result, it's an enjoyable movie and it's a lot of fun. And there were even a few moments that actually I was that surprised me. But in the end, it's not performing well and it's looking like it's going to be a flop.
Yeah, and yeah, but it's an interesting thing because like I feel like I am kind of happy about that. Like just in the sense that like I am happy that there seems to be more discernment going into these movies, but at the same time it does kind of suck for the people who did do well and probably deserve a little bit better than what they're getting. But I also don't think like it's necessarily, it's not career ending for Zachary Levi if Shazam doesn't appear again, and if he, because it's kind of like the cast of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones did very well. It ended up crashing and burning, but that hasn't really affected the career of the people that started in it. They managed to do other things. They moved on, and people still acknowledge that their performances were good. So I feel like that's kind of where superhero movies are at, where it's like people will look and see, well, that guy did well in it, even though it's a dying franchise, and people are not into it anymore. At least this person did well.
Well, unfortunately, it seems like people are actually turning a bit on Zachary Levi on social media. For one thing, I guess he made some negative comments about the Pfizer company on social media, and so now that's been interpreted as like being anti-vax, and that's gotten
But
a lot of
that
people.
doesn't have anything to do with the movies.
No, but it's like it affects, and some people have even gone as far as to say that his comments have actually impacted the success or lack of the movie because people make decisions based on their politics, I suppose. But then beyond that, he's a friend of Peter Safran, like one of the heads of DC Studios. So it's like there's photos on social media of them like going on Christmas vacation together skiing, and Zachary Levi's gone on his Instagram and like posting videos saying, "Hey guys, like give the new heads of DC a chance. Like, you can't judge them until you've seen their products." And it can either be interpreted as, "Oh, like I'm pitching for my buddy," or "I'm just trying to save my bacon. I'm trying to hope that they'll keep me around."
Yeah, which is a tough place to be in, but that's why you just stay off of social media if you're an actor. There's no winning, you know.
No, it really
It's
isn't.
it's just, yeah, you just don't participate, and the worst that can happen is people saying that you don't participate, but you won't even know.
So I went and saw Fury of the Gods with former Batchar co-host Asian John, and he gave the movie 2.8 out of 4 bad cookies. He enjoyed it, but to him it wasn't more than a 2.8. Hilariously, after I saw the movie, someone on YouTube pointed out that they drew a lot of comparisons to Power Rangers. It's like it's a bunch of teenagers and they transform into superheroes that all wear different colors, and they're fighting people with magic powers, and they summon monsters to fight for them. And I was like, yeah, I can definitely see a Power Rangers parallel here. But I'll get into like things that are different for better or for worse from the original film. So you mentioned the villain from the first film. There's like 3 villains in this one. They're all sisters, and I would say they're 2-dimensional villains. They're not quite 3-dimensional. They each have their unique perspectives, and they actually kind of disagree with each other, despite being sisters. Of course, sisters disagree with each other, but you know what I mean? Like one of them emerges as the ultimate final villain of the movie because they go down a route that the others don't agree with. But what's interesting is they're played by like Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu, and I can't give away the third one because that's a spoiler. But these are, I would say, well-known actors, and they're playing their parts well in this like action movie that's also kind of a bit of a comedy. So better villain than the first one, but still like not amazing. The disconnect I described between like Asher Angel and Zachary Levi in the first Shazam, it's kind of more pronounced here, because like Billy Batson's like he's like 17 on the cusp of becoming an adult, and he's got like this whole existential crisis thing about becoming an adult. But then when he's Zachary Levi, he still feels a lot like this big like man child, and it's a bit of like, is this actually the same character, or does another person kind of take over his body when he transforms? In fact, Asher Angel is only in like 3 or 4 scenes in this movie. Like, the first Shazam movie reveals that his whole foster family all get the superpowers too, right? And they all get to turn into these Shazam versions of themselves. The kids are not in the movie all that much. Like, there's actually entire scenes where they're hanging out their headquarters, and like they could be in their kid modes, but they're all in their Shazam modes. And so, yeah, I think if I can recall off the top of my head, there's only like 4 scenes where Asher Angel is actually on set. It's Zachary Levi the rest of the time. And to me, like, that was one of the things that made the first film special, is that it's this character that's played by, 2 actors of different ages.
Yeah. And maybe that was an overcorrection from the first one.
Maybe.
Right? Because like that was one of the things that people said was a problem, was that they were playing a different character.
Yeah. But it is kind of fun that the family gets to be more part of the superhero experience. Like, they have a couple of missions they do together, and they have to work together. And I was like, you don't really see, I mean, again, I guess outside of the Incredibles, you don't really see a team of superheroes that are also all related to each other. And they all get to kind of do the same thing, right? Of like playing, adult actors playing kids in adult bodies. Interestingly, the one Mary, the one character of Mary, the character has turned 18 in between movies. So when she transforms, she's still in the same body. Like, the actress who played the older version of her in the first Shazam is not in this one. And they don't explicitly say it on screen, but it's implied that, when you say Shazam, you transform into like the ideal version of yourself, which is usually like a fully grown adult. And I guess for her, because she's like the most mature and wise of the group, like, now that she's an adult, it's like she actually just changes clothes when she transforms.
Oh, okay. But that's, kind of, an interesting, like, at least they're putting something out there for those actors to get something like more of a place. Although, I don't know. I feel like I don't know if this is something that did happen, but did it like kind of like affect the character development of the characters now that they're all in it more?
I would say like the characters have more screen time, but not necessarily like the kid actors who played them in the first film.
Oh, okay. But I mean, like, as far as like developing their character and who they are.
Yeah, a bit of them. Some of them are still pretty one note. I can't even remember all their names. I remember their colors, like from their costumes.
Again, the Power Ranger thing.
Yeah. And Freddie Freeman, like the best friend who has like the crutch he walks with, he spends more time in the movie in his kid body than his adult body, and there's like story reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
So like that child actor gets a lot of screen time. Like Adam Brody plays his adult version. It's like he's not in the movie too much.
Okay.
There was a surprise, not a surprise. You know how like in the first Shazam, Superman's in it at the end, but you don't see his head.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because Henry Cavill wouldn't come back to do the cameo. Well,
yeah.
There's a scene in this where there's another DC character who shows up, but you don't see their face. And I was like, oh man, like, this is going to be just like the last Shazam. I was like, could they really not get that actor to come in? And
okay,
like,
so it wasn't the Flash.
So there's one scene where it's like that. You don't see their head. And then later on in the movie, they actually show up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's actually that character. And it's not like some of the weird cinematography I've seen in movies where it's clear that the characters are in the same scene, but the actors were on set together. It's like you see them in the same shot together. And I'll say who that was in spoilers. It might have been spoiled for you because they released a character poster for them the week like after the movie came out. Outside of that, this is also a movie where they kind of fall into the sequel problem, like bigger isn't always better. It's like the budget's bigger, there's more visual effects shots, like the peril that's portrayed, the monster army, like all of it's like yeah, this feels like a larger film, and you can see there's a bigger budget and more CGI. But I'm like, I kind of like wish they were telling a smaller story with these characters. Like this doesn't need to be like the whole city's in danger or like the whole world's in danger kind of adventure. And I think this was a case where, yeah, bigger did not equal better.
It's unfortunate, but there are also like, you know, the bigger also kind of usually depends on how you do it too. And I think that that's also, like we talked about, there were more things, but if they're not executed better, or if there isn't a better story, which I think is the biggest thing usually with sequels, is that it's harder to get a story that, you know, evolves on previously existing concepts. Like, you know, this thing, the whole thing where like a good sequel recontextualizes the first one, but without changing things in the first one. And that's just hard to write. And so even if you throw more at it, if you don't have like the fundamentals of it down, it'll be, you know, tough.
So we're going to go inside the spoiler verse now to just talk about some of the spoilery things that happen in this movie. But if you want to get to our final thoughts without hearing any spoilers, because maybe you want to see this movie, there'll be a time code in the description of the episode we can skip around. So I mentioned there's 3 sisters, right, who are all villains. They're all the daughters of Atlas, one of the gods that Shazam gets powers from. And 2 of them are Lucy Liu and Helen Mirren. So older women, different races. And then it's a surprise. Freddie, the best friend character, meets a new girl at school played by Rachel Zegler, which I actually don't know what her ethnic background is, but once again, like not the same as her 2 sisters. And you think, oh, Freddie's just making an potential love interest, and then it's revealed she's the 3rd sister, but she claims she did know that he was one of the Shazam people. And so that's like, it becomes a source of tension between like not just the 2 of them, but of course between her and her sisters. And then she ends up working with the Shazamily, as I'm now calling it.
The Shazamily, I like it.
To resolve she's part of their team in the final fight. And ironically, it's Lucy Liu who actually emerges as like the main villain, because she's the one who's like most set on revenge and like subjugating the human race, whereas the other one's just like, they just want the powers back. They're like, you stole, like the wizards stole our father's power and we want to take it back. And they're like, these children are running around using the power, and that's not right. So it was kind of interesting to have a group of villains who I guess were like varying degrees of evil in that sense. And ultimately like they had their own infighting. The character who appears, did you get, was this spoiled for you in like social media or anything? The DC character?
No, it wasn't. I'm assuming it's not the Flash, because then that would make total sense.
Okay, any other guesses?
Black Adam?
No, Wonder Woman is in this film.
Oh, wait. Yes, I did hear about that.
Yeah, so there's a scene where it's a dream where Shazam is on a date with Wonder Woman, and again, you only see her from behind and then like from the neck down, and I'm just like, oh gosh, it's another one of these things. They couldn't get the actor. But then in like one of the last scenes of the movie, she shows up and plays a big part, and she's like, Gal Gadot and Zachary Levi are on camera together. They even go as far as like play the Wonder Woman theme song when she like walks onto the set. I was like, okay. She's not part of the final fight or anything. She kind of shows up after all the fighting's done.
But she's in the movie.
Yeah, it's like kind of begs the question. It's like, where were you when? Because in the climax of the movie, Billy Batson, Shazam, sacrifices himself and he dies. And there's like a scene where, Freddy is like cradling like the body of kid Billy, and I'm like, oh no, it's gonna be one of these things where like the character actually wakes up and it's like they didn't actually die. And like they really built up this sacrifice because Billy is anxious about turning 18 and like becoming an adult and like worrying about leaving his family that he has found. And I'm
Right.
like, this is it. Like it was a big moment. And then I was like, maybe this is it for this character. Maybe they knew that they weren't going to continue with him and they're going to write like a big heroic death for him. And I was just waiting. I'm like, okay, like they're not going to kill him off. And then the scene ends with him still dead. And then it cuts to like a funeral scene for him. And I'm like, holy moly, they're actually going to kill this character off. And I was so impressed with the movie. And then Wonder Woman comes in, bangs her bracelets together, and like recreates the power of the gods, and Shazam is alive again.
How quickly did it work though?
Like from the moment that like he appears to be dead until the point he's resurrected, there's maybe like 4 minutes of runtime, maybe 5. So it
that's
felt
unfortunate.
it felt long enough where I'm like, oh, like this is actually happening, it's real. And then I was disappointed when it wasn't.
Yeah.
Because they held on to it a little, like it went on long enough that you thought it was real, and then they still pulled it back and said, actually, he's still fine and everything's gonna be okay. And then there's a post-credit scene where 2 of the characters from Peacemaker try to recruit him for the Justice Society, which
Okay.
apparently was supposed to be a post-credit scene for Black Adam, but The Rock refused. He was like, no, this isn't going to happen in my movie. So they reworked it and made a post-credit scene here. And then there's a second post-credit scene where it shows you Mark Strong in prison again, being visited by that worm again.
Oh, yeah, because everybody remembered and wanted that to be a thing.
So the post-credit scenes are confusing because with the DC universe rebooting, it's like, is this going to be just like the post-credit scene in Black Adam where Superman shows up and it suggests that something's going to happen, which we know that's not going to happen. There is going to be, it has been confirmed part of DC Studios that there's going to be a Amanda Waller show for HBO Max, which people are assuming is like James Gunn's way of continuing the story from Peacemaker without making more Peacemaker. Because Peacemaker ends with Amanda Waller's information about the Suicide Squad and all that being released to the public. So everyone kind of knows the shady stuff she's been up to. So there is a possibility that Shazam could become part of the Waller show. And because the Justice Society played such a big role in Black Adam and it's shown that she's involved with that maybe there's a way in for Shazam to continue on. But as I said, like, I don't know if there really is much of a chance for him at this point because the movie's done so poorly.
Right. That's unfortunate, but you never know. Like some of those, if it does go into like a streaming program instead, that might keep it going a little bit longer.
And it's it is a funny scene. Like they say, we want to recruit you for the Justice. And then he just responds yes automatically because he thinks they're talking about the Justice League.
Right.
And then he's like, the Justice Society. And he's like, wait, what? And then he goes on and is like, it's a little confusing that there's 2 different groups with justice in the name. So it was funny. And then, yeah, the one about Mark Strong's character, again, it's like Mark Strong is becoming the king of post-credit scenes that don't go anywhere because he was also in a post-credit scene for Green Lantern where it suggests that Sinestro is going to get the yellow ring.
Oh, yeah.
I guess
that
they were
never
just,
happened.
I guess they're hoping that, again, that there'd be more Shazam movies. But like I said, they'd be lucky if some of the characters get to continue, let alone actually having another full-on Shazam movie.
Yeah. But and it is hard, like when there's that level of uncertainty in the future. But post credit scene. But I feel like it is more and more you're getting post credit scenes that do actually go somewhere, even if it doesn't go far. Like there'll be one season of it at least, or like with Peacemaker, like there was at least one season. It was kind of guaranteed that one season would happen because of its post credit scene. So I don't know. There may be hope yet. And if it's keeping good characters, I feel like that's just always good.
And by the end of the movie, the wizard Shazam is like back to life.
I knew, well, yeah, I knew about that, but
And he actually, Jimon Hansu, actually, he's in the movie a lot, and he's quite funny. He does a really good job of playing off of like all the different kid actors and stuff, and even the like the adult actors.
nice.
And
Well, yeah, that's good then to, also allows you to have like a different actor and different interactions too. But was him coming back to life kind of a foreshadowing of Billy Batson's,
no,
miracle,
because
or was it just
he's like,
completely
yeah, like
separate? Okay,
it was, yeah, completely separate. Because
that's
he's
too
like, he
bad.
ends up having a major role in the film as he's like trying to help them like combat these sisters. They also
Okay,
encounter this like magic book in their headquarters that can basically like write anything. It's like the Chat GPT, except it's a book that has a floating pen. Like
okay,
you ask it any question, it answers.
right.
And
Oh,
it becomes a bit of a Deus Ex Machina because they just like a lot of exposition comes from what is this? Who is this? And the book like answers everything for them.
oh, okay. I was gonna say, is it like the chair?
The chair?
The chair that you sit in and you become basically omniscient. The one that made Batman asked who the Joker was
Oh
and got
yes,
the answer
Mobius
that was
chair. No, it's not like that.
okay.
But yeah,
Spoilers for people who don't know about it. I don't
yeah,
know.
and we're in the spoiler verse. Every
Oh
spoilers for
yeah, I
everything.
mean it's a spoilers for a comic that came out like a while ago,
Yeah,
so it's not really a big deal.
yeah. His the foster parents finally find out that all their kids are superheroes in this movie.
Well, I kind of figured because in the trailer wasn't there like a picture of all of them like hugging or something?
Maybe. Yeah, I guess that was kind of a spoiler now that I think about it. They're humorously, the Shazamily is referred to as the Philadelphia fiascos in like the media because all their rescues and stuff involve property damage, and like you can tell against like their kids trying to do this.
Okay.
Um, and last thing I'll say, there's a very funny scene. Like there's a bridge collapsing, and one of the cars that's falling off the bridge, like the woman's listening to "I Need a Hero" in their car, and as Shazam he grabs the car to save her, and he's like, wow, are you actually listening to this song right now? So coming around to final thoughts, Shazam: Fury of the Gods. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was an entertaining movie. Some people have said, "Oh, it's a family movie." There's too much like kind of like detailed creatures and kind of like violence. I wouldn't feel comfortable like with kids under the age of 12 really watching this one. So it kind of fails in that front. It's like it's too dark to be kid friendly, but then it's too not dark to be like adults only. But I like DC. I like these characters, so I'm sort of blind to the superhero fatigue. And even though Asian John gave it 2.8, I'm going to give Shazam: Fury of the Gods 3.2 out of 4 bad cookies.
I'm gonna give it I might actually check it out because I mean, again, it sounded like it was just a fun movie. So, and that's at this point, that's what I'm in the mood for
Yeah.
especially
It got
superhero
some good
movies.
laughs out of me at several parts, which I know
There
doesn't
you
say much because I'm pretty easy to laugh. But so Shazam: Fury of the Gods is in theaters now. If you care at all about wanting to see the Shazam character show up in future DC projects, go show your support because at the rate it's going, he's probably not going to be in anything else, which is sad.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
Now, Beeper, we've talked about this off air. we're actually going to take a hiatus here on the Bachelor podcast. Looking ahead to the next couple of months, I'm going to be traveling a lot for work. I've got some training courses that I'm in charge of planning. And then in May, Tater Tot and I are getting married, and then we're moving. So it just doesn't, there's just not enough hours in the day to dedicate to the podcast with everything else going on. So we're going to take a 2-month hiatus, and we'll come back in June. I think we'll come back the weekend Across the Spider-Verse comes out. And then in between time, there's a lot of great movies coming out. So Beeper, there's the Dungeons and Dragons movie. It comes out the week that this show is being released. There's the Super Mario Brothers movie. There's this Knights of the Zodiac movie we know about now. There's Guardians Volume 3. Fast X, which I know you're not as excited about as I am.
Yeah, well,
And then the live action Little Mermaid. Like, those are all major movies that we would normally talk about on the show that are coming out during this hiatus. So I don't know if it'll make more sense for our first episode back to be like here's a recap of all the things we missed while we were on hiatus, or just jumping into Spider-Verse and then catching up afterwards.
Yeah.
If you had to vote for one of those options, what would you pick right now?
I think maybe like a catching up / talking about a little bit like what we did today, where we were like, is there things we recommend, things that we did watch, and this kind of talk about. I don't know how many of those I'll be able to get to watch regardless, but yeah.
But if you had to only see one, I feel like it'd be a toss between D&D and Guardians for you, right? Because you really like the Guardians movies, but you also really like D&D.
Yeah, I've heard interesting things about the D&D movie though, because it is impossible for me to avoid spoilers because of things that I watch and and the podcast that Mjolnir listens to. And so I don't know. Yeah, I think D&D probably, because would rather talk about that than another Marvel movie.
Come on, it's his James Gunn's last Marvel movie. It's the end of his, let's face the music. It's his final. You love the Guardians of the movies. Are you really going to say? You've always spoken highly of them on the podcast.
That's true, but I still think there's just a slightly higher chance that I'll see the D&D movie, just because, as you said, I am more in tune with the D&D these days. Yeah, maybe in those 2 months though, at some point we should, almost 2 months, we should meet up and re-record the intro.
Yeah, hey, we'll make that promise, guys. When we come back
at some point before the next episode of the Bad Jar podcast, our intro will be a little bit more accurate.
D&D will not be a recent insurgency in Beeper's interest anymore.
Yeah, because actually, Facebook reminded me that it has been 5 years since it became my primary hobby. So,
yeah, all right.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys will get a chance to watch all this stuff. I know like The Mandalorian season 3 is out right now on Disney Plus. There's all kinds of.
That's a thing.
There's just so much. It's so much content.
There's a good chance I will watch Everything Everywhere All at Once in the meantime too, because Mjolnir really wants to watch it.
That's also on Prime Video.
Yeah, we were going to watch it instead of Marcel the Shell with Shoes, but then our daughter was still awake, so we figured maybe one of those is slightly more appropriate to watch with a toddler.
Yeah, so we're going to take a nice little break here, but don't forget to keep watching movies, watching shows. You can go back and listen to some of our old episodes if you really want to. And we'll come back in June. I'll be a married man at that point.
Oh, so yes.
I'll probably sound totally different. I might have a totally different voice all of a sudden.
Yeah, because my voice changed a lot when that happened.
Yes, your voice. You sound totally different.
Yeah,
being married versus not when you weren't married.
I feel like being a father probably changed my voice more because of the lack of sleep.
So yes, we'll see you guys in June. Until then, when we kind of do a recap on everything we've talked about or everything we've missed. I'm Average Joe.
I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
Is it Monday yet?